Hello, folks. Great to be here with you today. Again, my name is Tom Cassels, Managing Director with Manatt Health. We're an integrated strategy, policy, and legal advisory firm. Very excited to be here with this great group, who I'm going to let introduce themselves, but particularly excited because of the topic we have to talk about. AI, data, drug development. It's hard to think about things that are more engaging and exciting. I'll admit I am a little bit nervous because on the way in last night, my cab driver, I don't know if you guys get this as well, asked me, "Oh, are you in town for fun or for work?" I said, "For work." And he asked me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm talking about healthcare and precision medicine. And he was like, tell me what that means. And I was like, well, it's kind of we're at a Hinge moment. And he's like, oh, like Tinder? And then I was like, well, explain Tinder. No. But in reality, I think we have a lot to get through today. So I'm going to actually ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about the work that they do, and then we're going to do two things. We're going to get into some questions that I've pre-prepared, but if you want to ask really good questions, you have the opportunity to go into your app. If you find the session today, you can live input questions for the group. Would love for you to be able to do that and hear from the voice of the audience. So I'm going to start to my left and let's get going.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everybody. My name is Milad Alucozai. It's great to be here. I'm a computational neuroscientist by training, turned founder, turned investor. Similar to Tom, this is a very unique moment for me as well because when I started my career, everybody thought I was in a niche field. They were saying this probabilistic modeling, machine learning, AI stuff. Does anybody really care about that? And I remember filing my first AI patent years ago and the reaction of folks telling me, I don't really think this is going to matter. And so very strange world that we live in today where folks like me are front and center on panels and talks and people are excited about what we're working on. My most recent project has been being a co-founder at Revalia Bio. At Revalia Bio, we really are working to lead this new era of human data. The way we do that is we've built a platform that's a human data tech stack, and through that platform, we've introduced our very first product, which are human data trials. And so we're really excited to be at the intersection or interface of an AI infrastructure company for the entire industry. That includes pharma companies, biotechs, and medical device companies. And we work with our partners to de-risk their assets and their technologies, all the while making sure that we can do this without introducing harm to the patients. So think of us as the ability to take human data, get it in high fidelity, and be able to productize that and give it to the hands of those that are developing assets and technologies for everybody in this room. And we're excited to be able to do that without having to dose the first patient. And so great to be here and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday morning. My name's Janet Jin. I'm a cancer biologist by training. I'm part of the Amgen Precision Medicine team. I lead a team that leverages technology and innovation to advance our precision medicine strategies. Within our group, it's a very multidisciplinary group. I think in this day and age, that's what's required to advance science. We have pathologists in our group, we have radiologists, we have assay development scientists, we have diagnostic expertise, and then we have the computational side as well as computational imaging. So all of these, I think, need to be integrated to advance our precision medicine strategies.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Zhou. I'm the CEO for the Cancer Research Institute. I'm a molecular biologist by training, cancer biologist, and spent much of my time at the bench studying oncogenes. And then actually for the last 10 years of my career, I was in startup working for a company called Color as their chief science officer, really exploring how we can bring germline genetic testing into everyday clinical care. And then for the last year, been helming the Cancer Research Institute, which is a 70-plus-year-old nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping fuel basic science research for tumor immunology and cancer immunology. And I'm very excited to be on this panel today.
Well, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. I think let's introduce the topic and get right in. I'd like to start with the optimistic point. I always do. So what are the most significant opportunities that you all see right now in collecting and modeling high quality multi-omic data from genetics to genomics to really drive precision medicine forward? And I'd love to start with you, Alicia, and we can come back to me.
Absolutely. So I love this question. And actually another hat that I've worn in the past is I spent 6 years being one of the PIs on the NIH's All of Us research program. And that program, of course, is aiming to collect 1 million individuals' EHR data and also whole genome sequencing for the purposes of being able to help precision medicine really get into the hands of every patient. And I think what we learned from that initiative is that there are certain types of data that are much easier to collect and harmonize than others. And in fact, all the multi-omics data, I mean, there's some batch effects, there's definitely instrument-to-instrument variation, technology variation, but really I think of those types of problems to be solved as really technical problems. I actually think what becomes difficult is really on the more clinical side of the data, right? Where we're talking about different EHRs and different providers are actually going in sometimes with unstructured notes about what the phenotype of the patient is. And I think the other thing that we realized as we went is that different patients are actually coming into the healthcare systems for different interactions. And so you're actually not necessarily getting all of those interactions. And I think that's where it's really exciting right now for us to see some of these other technologies coming in, especially wearables, where we know now we're tracking a lot more sort of the daily types of data that everyone is able to have on their watch. But then I think, how do you integrate that into the data that we already have? This is a really fascinating question. I think at the end of the day, I came in as a molecular biologist really excited and thinking about how you get genomes to be the same and on the same format. And I quickly realized that the harder problem was going to be how do we get people's phenotypes?
Great. I've never been as excited or enthusiastic about precision medicine because I feel like it's really a hinge moment. I think we're really seeing a convergence of the toolbox we have, right? We have all these multi-omics data sets, genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, epigenome, everything you can think of. And then we have the availability of AI analytics. And then we have the EHR data. Like all of these, for a single patient, just imagine how much data we can generate, right? How much insights we can generate to help us understand disease biology, to help us develop new targets, right? To help us develop new biomarkers. I feel like the stars are kind of aligning, right? And then we have to develop methods that are compliant to generate insights. On top of our traditional thinking of multi-omics, genomics, transcriptomics, today we also have spatial information as well. And that's just incredibly exciting because then we can look at cell-cell interactions, right? In cancer biology, we can ask how the tumor cells are interacting with the extracellular matrix, the tumor microenvironment, right? Sorry to get technical, but to me, this is just so exciting because of the holistic picture we can see from a cancer biology perspective and how much insights and understanding we can derive from all the data sets.
And to build on what Janet and Alicia are saying, not only is it extremely exciting, there are so many untapped possibilities and questions. So I spent my entire career in drug development tools and platforms. When I was wearing and building the founder hat, building these types of companies, and then transitioning as an investor. I've backed around 100 different companies as an investor, all in this space. And there's never been a moment like we have today where you see all sorts of collaboration, new types of models, almost on a daily basis. The advances we're having on a weekly or monthly basis, that's akin to what was taking years and years of development. And so it's super exciting. It's definitely a time where everybody in this room is excited about. But the realities are also, biology is really, really hard. It's really complex. And I remember my very first lecture from a professor years and years ago, the conversation I had with him, and then I saw him again. The same lesson that he gave me then is that, look, 90% failure rates, drugs take way too long, and they cost way too much. And I was looking at this just to put into context. It's honestly cheaper or equivalent to build another Burj Khalifa than it is to take another drug to market. And so just to put that in perspective, there's new diseases every year that need treatment. And so for us to really think about this, we need to go beyond just single omics or single part of the chapter. To write the whole book, we've had chapters missing, and now we're finally in an era where, as Janet and Alicia both alluded to, we're finally seeing tools and technologies, but as opposed to seeing them as disparate entities, there's utility in all of these. There's utility in all these models. Everybody has their own model. I get pitched models every other day in terms of what they're building and their own data sets, but we're finally, as an industry, needing to centralize and standardize. And we at Revalia get really excited because our human data tech stack isn't just our core technology, but we try to encompass and bring in others. And the whole point is to unlock the utility across the industry, because that's how we win. We grow the pie for everybody, and there's utility for all these types of use cases as we get into working with different types of groups. And so it's a super exciting time, but we got to approach it in a way that's also calculated and meaningful and thoughtful.
Great. That was the question from Light Tom. Let's go Dark Tom now. So in light of that, and really thinking about what concerns you, what challenges are we facing? Every time I read a quote from Sam Altman, I get a little less soulful inside. And so I do want to be realists about, in the face of all this excitement, what do we have to face as challenges first? And I'm going to start with you because you're lucky.
I don't think I can solve your soulfulness. That may be out of my job description, but
I mean, take your time.
That's right. That may take more than a paddle, but I like that. It is an interesting thing, and a lot of my colleagues in the Bay Area, one of the things we think about a lot, we get excited with technology. There's a lot of cool science and technology. Often, what many of us miss is, what's the impact? What's the translation? Why are we building it? Who are we building it for? Do we have the right people in the room that are helping us think about how we build this? And when it comes to data fidelity and data models in particular, often a lot of these models are built in silos. Every NIH grant, every PI that's working on something has their own training set, has their own data. Often there's no actual generalizability or often reproducibility as well. And a lot of this hinges on us trying to think about, how do we build testing standards? How do we make sure we can benchmark these tools? And also, are we building towards an actual North Star in a direction? Are we trying to build in a way that the utility of what we're doing is hopeful and optimistic? And often I meet folks who have really cool tech and they don't think about those other consequences, or how do you implement it? I come from the era of in silico modeling. I built a lot of those tools and we're part of the pioneering teams behind them. And often what we get a lot is, we came up with this really cool in silico tech. It targets this new hit ID, these new targets that we're trying to discover. Then we go, can we even synthesize any of these? Does anyone know how to manufacture any of this stuff? We don't put any of those considerations to bear. And in healthcare, there are structures, and you have to work within them, and you have to be thoughtful and involve all these different groups. So there's an element of this of just hyper-awareness and being very careful. And so that's the element I do get worried about, and I see it oftentimes. And it usually is a consequence of my community in the tech ecosystem in Silicon Valley trying to push tech. And sometimes pushing tech isn't the only solution. There's other elements of structure and trust and other components to the equation that are just as critical.
That's it.
Yeah, totally agree with that. There are many challenges. One of them I'd like to point out is we often forget in this AI world that we still need to generate this data, right? Generating the data requires assay development, right? A lot of these technologies are becoming more and more complex. So we need to come up with new ways of validating these assays. We need to make sure that we generate meaningful data. Otherwise, AI algorithm is not going to help if garbage in, garbage out, right? So one thing we really have to be mindful is, that's why in our organization we have the assay development folks as well as the computational biology folks, and they work very closely together. We need to make sure that we validate these multi-omic data sets, and we need to make sure that there's a way of translating into the clinic as well. As you mentioned, what is the regulatory path? How do we make an impact, right? When we have so much data, right, we need to be disciplined as scientists. We need to focus. We need to identify what is our hypothesis, what are the challenges we're trying to solve, how do we translate this into the clinic, and ultimately, you know, what we're trying to do is make an impact for patients, right? How does what we do today, how is the infrastructure that we're putting in today, how is that going to help us make an impact to patients? I think that's something that as scientists, we need to be, again, focused and disciplined.
Can I ask just a follow-up question on that? How important do you think it is to involve actual patients in the work that you're doing because of the, you know, you both come at this, and sorry to interrupt, we can go on, but you know, the practical implications sometimes get beyond us when we are deep in our vibe. You know, how important is that?
For sure. We need to understand the patient's perspective, right? We need to also educate patients as well to let them know what's available, what are the latest technologies, why is it important, why you should do biomarker testing, what types of testing you should do, what are their challenges, right? For sure, patient perspective is extremely important.
Maybe just to build on that question, you know, Tom, for us, we put the patient at the center of the work that we do. A lot of the core, we mentioned the AI data challenges. A lot of it also comes down to the initial source of the data. We need better sources of data. And the core of our technology comes from actual live functioning human organs that were not available to be transplanted for whatever, a myriad of reasons. Rather than discarding that, we take those organs that are donated for research and we're able to run these really compelling studies on them to answer these really tough questions. But that involves donor families, that involves working with health systems. So the entire loop of our development cycle begins with the patient in mind. And oftentimes, I think the industry needs to think this way because that actually gives us and generates wonderful insights. And if you ever meet a patient family, especially those with rare diseases and family foundations, a lot of the efforts in those communities, they're all looking to advance or share data or find collective ways of benefiting their child, or if they've lost a child through it, they want the gift of donation of the data or the information to be used, and we need to build better systems so that that can happen. And so we try to think of loss and the gift of that as some way of being able to honor that legacy. And I think if the industry started to think more like that, it would actually encompass a lot of what you're asking, which I think we still need to work as an industry to develop.
Yeah, that's really human. Apologies for stepping on your opportunity to go dark.
Sure.
Please.
Sure. I mean, I think the thing about the opportunity for AI that we are seeing all of us in our hands is we've seen it applied to natural language processing in the way that we can speak with AI and it has this ability to speak back to us as a human. We forget that the reason that it can do that is because there's this truth set that it's been trained on, where we as humans can intelligently understand whether it's speaking gibberish back to us or if it's speaking something that makes sense. The reality of biology is that for the most part, we don't know how anything works, right? We're still trying to figure that out ourselves. And at the same time, we know that things are breaking, and we're seeing patients who are coming in where the system has been disrupted, perturbed, and broken, and we're trying to reset it back to where it should be. But we don't actually have a truth set. So I think for that reason, I do think there's a ton of opportunity for AI. I think that there's a ton of opportunity for us to see how it can help us in the areas that we have some knowledge about, but also it's going to be very difficult for us to think about how can it map against realities that we don't really fully understand yet. I think it's both a challenge and an opportunity. I think one of the coolest things about AlphaFold, for example, is that one of the ways that it works is that it actually has no preconceived notion of what the order of amino acids are. As a molecular biologist, the first thing you think about when you look at a protein sequence is the sequence of the amino acids. You think, okay, this leucine goes next to this alanine, goes next to this tyrosine, according to this sequence. Molecular biologists, when they think about protein structure, they think about that sequence. AlphaFold doesn't care. AlphaFold puts all of those peptides together, all of those amino acids in this weird slurry, and then it comes up with the correct protein folding for that protein without having any constraints about what order those amino acids are supposed to be in. So we know that there's something sort of interesting about using probability in this way, where you don't constrain it in the ways that humans want to. But I think we do have to really understand what the truth set we're going to be validating against is, and what Milad said about benchmarking. Because without that, then we're all kind of just creating abstract art with biology.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. I wish you were in my cab last night. But you know, the truth set against the data set, especially when we bring AI and LLMs into the effect, we're almost kind of fighting against the light there. So there are plenty of ways to ask questions about this next topic. And by the way, you might have thought that when I mentioned the questions that was optional. Not. I haven't seen any questions come in yet, so I'm going to randomly call on someone in the next 90 to 120 seconds, unless I see something come through. No, but like lightning round, starting with you, Alicia. Digital twins, overhyped, underhyped, just hyped enough?
I have a two-part answer. I think, okay.
I'll give you plenty of chance to explain your answer.
Just hyped enough for the parts of biology that we well understand. I think it is overhyped for the parts of biology we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are definitely more mature use cases for digital twins, for example, in the manufacturing setting. And maybe in clinical development when people think about digital twins to generate synthetic controls. Maybe those are some more mature use cases. And in other use cases, I mean, it's still early days, right? I'm very hopeful, but it's still early days.
This might be controversial. I'll keep it short, Tom. I would say, in general, across the board, I think it's overhyped. And I see this often with a lot of tech trends. But there are pockets of really good teams in science and use cases. So, yeah.
So if you had to say, by the way, you all would do well on a political debate stage because nobody apparently understands the quick round part of my question. If you're thinking about where kind of the hype is most real, is it in clinical development? Is it more in the discovery phase? And where is regulation anywhere close to kind of meeting the needs of where we're working in this space?
So I think that there are certain areas of medicine where we know things are slightly more deterministic, where I do think digital twins could be quite useful. And I'm thinking about here, where we're talking about single gene linkage, genetic disorders. It's actually the same place where biological twins have been really useful, right? It's the place where twin studies initiated. And so I think there are places where we know if you make one perturbation and then you have a control, then you are able to see how that one perturbation is going to change your circumstances. And what's great about a digital twin is that you can run that experiment as many times as you want. And that's amazing. But then there's so much stochasticity in the way that we all develop as humans, and in the way that disease occurs in us, and in the way that treatment response happens. It's not nearly as deterministic as we think it is. And for that reason, I do think there's a limit. There is actually a ceiling to what digital twins can do, to the same reason why there's a ceiling to what we can learn from biological twins, right? There's just certain diseases that we're able to understand really quickly, and then other ones where it's still baffles us today. And so I think that's the reality. But I do think when we look at disease areas where we know that there's a more deterministic mechanism, and we're able to disrupt that mechanism in that kind of controlled way, I do think digital twins can be very, very useful.
I have to be honest, digital twins is not something that I think about every day. However, I do think there are use cases, as I mentioned earlier, in clinical development. There are cases where just having a control arm is not feasible. So in that case, I think having a digital twin, taking a digital twin approach of having a synthetic control arm may be helpful for clinical development. Of course, having the promise really is every patient have a personalized kind of digital twin that can predict, your disease progression, what kind of therapies would benefit each person. I think that's still very early days, but that's certainly the promise of digital twins.
No.
I feel like I often see this in trends, and I remember the trend when everybody now in their pitch decks, when they pitched me as an investor, they have to have the word AI splattered somewhere there. I remember the era of like delivery nanomedicines. That was like everybody had a nanoparticle that was, NLPs was the thing. We were going to cure everything. And then precision medicine. There's all these type of buzzwords. Digital twin then resurfaces as a way, says mostly in the discovery and silico space, but also in clinical trials. And to all the reasons Alicia as well as Janet brought up, it's what I consider and think about a lot too. And I akin this when I see this in the tech world, where people would promise autonomous vehicle delivery. Remember these like little robots across campuses and cities? And then you find out companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars on the back of that. Then you find out the majority of that money was spent hiring actual humans that were laboriously navigating them with little controllers. And I'm thinking, well, that's an interesting promise to make. And so I don't think we're there yet with digital twins and the modeling that the promise that people make. And we got to be careful in the healthcare space, because I know it gets the headlines and I know it can get you money from certain people. But the reality is it does set our industry back when failures and things occur, because they attest it to the entire industry. And so we at Revalia are very sensitive with that. And so a lot of our work is physical, and we build the physical systems. And until you have enough data that comes in to build true foundational models, only then do the digital twins work. And I don't think we're there yet. And we're one of the companies, I think, that's pioneering the space. And if we're telling you digital twins are not today, that probably means there are very few who can make the claim that they are or they're doing it. And so we just got to be a little bit cautious. But I know people get excited about it. It sounds really sci-fi and cool. And, there's a benefit and a balance of some of that as well.
No, I think that's true. You made me laugh because of the roving delivery bots. Nobody apparently pointed out to the developers that human nature is to kick them over. And then somebody has to be a good Samaritan. So apparently threats work. So we got a bunch of questions, and I'll go with the ones that are getting the most love from other people. But just to start, given the complexity of the data that's being generated and subsequently analyzed by AI models, how have you seen representations of drug effects and disease signatures advanced? And are we moving beyond single target hypotheses of disease treatments and subsequent drug development? Janet, do you want to take the lead for us?
Sure, definitely. I mean, we use these multi-omics data to help us understand combination therapies, for example, potential combination strategies for our drugs. We also try to develop composite biomarker signatures, right? So for example, our decode team, genetics team, they have identified protein risk scores, for example, using proteomics. This is a composite score to predict risk for cardiovascular disease. So I think we will see more and more of these moving from single biomarker to more of a composite biomarker strategy.
You know, the reality of it also just ultimately comes down, like fundamentally as an industry, you know, we've cured every disease in mice and most of those not in humans. And so there's a reality where spending lots of money on certain models, at the end of the day, coming back to benchmarking as well as the data source themselves, I see a lot of activity in trying to make decisions based on some of the AI work and large language models. And there's a push to put more money into that and make in silico happen. But at the end of the day, if the fundamentals aren't there, it's a real struggle, and the multi-omics element is real. And so, like I said, you're missing chapters in a book if you don't take into effect the multi-omics nature of it. So our organ stack, for example, the human data stack we mentioned, the Rosetta Stone of that are human organs, and those live perfused functional human organs allow us to have de-identified patient data layer. So there's information from EHR coming in, then there's 3D physiology, there's a genomics, proteomics component to it, but that's not enough either. And so you need to incorporate other groups that have other utility across the board. And I think that's where we need to start to think about this, because as Alicia and I both said earlier, biology is complicated, and a lot of these diseases, the data sets that we train them on, they don't represent the whole population, and they're not really good at being able to tell the difference. It looks nice in a simulation, but they don't translate in reality. And we have a lot of models like that. Many of the animal models that are used don't translate well, but a lot of the in silico models as well. So we have to be thinking about this broadly beyond just a single tool. Everybody in the space needs to work together to then be able to usher in that era.
Excellent.
I think also when we talk about multi-omics, what I think is most interesting and very promising, and actually Janet talked about this, is the idea of being able to capture spatial information as well. And then the other piece of this is actually the time component of this. So when we think about combination therapies, and I'll just speak from the oncology point of view, whenever you think about patients undergoing cancer treatments, there's sort of standard of care first, and then there's a series of drugs that they take after, and then if they fail these, then potentially they go into clinical trials. And of course, that's the way that it works from a regulatory standpoint, from a safety standpoint. That's why we do it that way. But at the same time, maybe the right order to do those drugs in is not the order that we put them into the patient just because of standard of care and the way the regulatory works, right? I mean, one of the things that I think about all the time for the field of immunotherapy, where we're really trying to activate your immune system to go after, target, and kill cancer, I mean, we have patients who die of sepsis because the immune system is being activated too late. The bacterial infection has overtaken the body. And so then, yet we're trying immunotherapies in stage 4 metastatic patients who are on their last round of standard of care and failing everything. Sometimes the order actually really matters. And so I think if we are able to use in silico models to start answering these questions, not just about the combinations of therapies that we're using, but also maybe the right order in which we're supposed to use them, I think that would be really interesting. I think the only way for us to actually have our models predict that well is that when we go to generate the data, we are not generating data of models at rest. We're generating data of models that are being perturbed, and we're capturing what happens before, during, and after perturbation, because now we're really understanding how the system reacts when perturbed. And I think that really that's ultimately how we're going to be able to start to crack some of these combination therapies.
No. Alicia, you've been active in public-private partnerships in the past, and we talked about this. Well, you all talked about this on the speaker prep call. I snagged the seat late, but you know, we have and thank you very much to the person who asked this question. It's heating up. the question is this: amongst the kind of willingness to partner across public-private lines and across business lines, feel free to be the first to answer this. With everyone protecting their data, and now with AI data becoming more important, are you all open to sharing your data with the world for the benefit of advancing AI in medicine?
I mean, I have the easiest answer to this one because I represent a nonprofit organization. So the answer is simply yes. But I also think you're actually getting to a really interesting point, which is what is the unique value proposition of different types of partners in public-private partnerships. I do think that it is the role of public and nonprofit to be able to provide some of these foundational training data sets for people to build potentially private assets that they can commercialize off of that. It's actually really important to have both. I think that when you think about the more expensive shared costs for the field, that's where I think nonprofit and public infrastructure should really be putting our resources. When you're thinking about the places where you're going to differentiate the creation of a product and the commercialization of that product, I think that's a uniquely good place for private companies to be competing against each other. And there is a reason why then they're not sharing their IP or not sharing their algorithms. So I think both of those things have to happen, because at the end of the day, it is a business model. At the end of the day, it actually does have to work. And so if everybody's really sharing everything, there's no business model to that. But I do think, again, I have the easy answer because I represent nonprofit, and it's clearly yes for my space.
Sure.
Yeah, for us, I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis, right? Obviously, we're not going to share every data. However, there are cases where I think a single company is not going to be sufficient to advance our technologies. Just giving you an example. For example, if we wanted to advance a surrogate endpoint for a trial, right, or an intermediate endpoint for a trial, each company may have some data sets to look at patient-level data. However, in order to do this, to advance a biomarker to the next stage, which is being accepted by the regulator as a surrogate endpoint, we need study-level data, we need trial-level data, we need to show this across different targets, therapies. And this is when different companies need to come together and demonstrate that this biomarker or this method applies across different trials, different therapies. So in those settings, I think it's very important for different companies to come together and collaborate.
I would say in the era we're living in now, and I look across my portfolio in this way as well, I don't make an investment unless I think a company can become a company that can collaborate. And I think collaboration is going to be key, and the way that we did this from day one, Revalia wouldn't be where it is today if we didn't have not only the patient in mind, but all these different collaborators. And so just to give you a sense of that, our research is built on $40 to $50 million in grants that came from NIH, different types of institutes, and work that way. We've raised $30 million in private capital. That came from traditional Silicon Valley investors. It also came from nonprofits, family offices, and that swath of investor pool is also a unique reflection of why we're building what we're building. And on top of that, we're going to be announcing in the next couple of days, it's going to be public, that we just signed a $30 million government contract. And that is a reflection of working closely with the FDA, with the government, because at the end of the day, healthcare in my mind, personally, speaking for myself, should be seen as national security and should be seen as something that we, whether you're at a big pharma company, a medical device company, a startup, or anywhere in between, should be seen as a priority. And the way you do that is somebody's going to own the tech stack of the future. And I would like that to be America and our allies. And if we're going to be able to do that, we need to make heavy investments that are opening up private-public partnerships. And the only way that we've been able to get to where we are today, we were revenue generating the second we founded. And that's a sign that that only happens when we have amazing pharma partners and strategic implementation of initiatives that allows this type of effort. And so that's going to continue to be the recipe for our success. And we like to just open it up because that's the secret sauce. It only works when we try to fix the collaboration model. And if you solve for that, that unlocks so much business opportunity. Amongst all these other startups too, we don't see them as competitors. We want to be the infrastructure providers that helps everybody grow the pie to make money while also ultimately finding cures for patients.
First of all, those are great answers and actual substance. So maybe you shouldn't be in politics, any of the three of you. Two quick questions. The first is yes, no. Do you think that the industry is taking patient-reported outcomes seriously at this point? And that'll kind of lead into my next question.
I would say no.
I would say we certainly take patient level
Oh, we're back on the bill. Okay.
very seriously.
Janet is going to be the politician.
I would say no as well.
Yeah. And the reason that I asked that, first of all, it was a great question from the audience. Thank you all for your questions. The bigger reason is we talked about this just at the before we came on. Health equity and equitable access is something that is in balance with innovation, and I think if there's one thing you could do to further that health equity goal, to be more in balance with the excitement that we're talking about here today, what might that be? And maybe we can start.
Yeah, and actually, so the question about patient-reported outcomes, the reason that I think the answer to this is no is I think about how much effort we've put in as an industry in a field to think about standardizations of the types of data that we believe are valuable. Think about how much work has gotten into the human reference genome, which now we're on version 38 of. There's an entire army of scientists making sure that every time we talk about a DNA mutation, we're talking about the same one. There's not a single work stream like that around patient-reported outcomes, which to me means that we don't believe that the data is scalable or that we don't believe that it's going to be reliable, and so we collect it, but if we're not standardizing it, then we're not actually going to be able to use it in the way that we want to use it to train these models. So for me, my symptom of why I think the industry doesn't take PROs seriously is because we're not doing enough to try to standardize those. I do think we should be making those efforts, and I also think that there's all sorts of different ways you can collect them. So your question about equity, I think that the reality today is that most of the data that we collect are collected within these hubs of health systems, hospitals, clinical trials, which usually are happening in individual places. The reality is that care and health is happening entirely outside of that. So we have to be thinking about how are we going to capture standardized data that includes both quantitative and qualitative outcomes for patients in a way that's actually where they're at, not necessarily where the doctors and scientists are at. And that's where I talked before about wearables, but I think it is standardization around both the qualitative and quantitative side that's going to be really important if we're going to use these data to train up these models.
Yeah, I think that's an really important question. So for precision medicine, biomarker testing is what we do, and to make an impact, I think we need to make the assays, the biomarker testing simpler. We need to have non-invasive methods, right? Instant tissue is very hard to get. Blood-based testing, non-invasive methods, making the testing easier, cheaper. That's how we can really increase the access of biomarker testing.
I think to build on, I agree with everything that Alicia and Janet said. I think the other thing to build on here is throwing money at this has been the default of a lot of groups, or just talking about it. Those are the two things I often see. The reality is there are structural, systemic things that need to be worked on and fixed. Access is a huge component, and trust. And too often we lose sight of that, and that gets in the way of us being able to really think about how we're going to advance this. And precision medicine, digital twins, all the exciting things we're very excited about in this room it doesn't happen until we solve this fundamental problem. And it is something that we need to think of as a valuable capacity opportunity, because it moves the entire industry forward, as opposed to what often happens as it often is an outlier conversation or topic.
This has been a really substantive and kind of, to me, constructive and generative conversation. Why don't we all thank our panelists? And I look forward to seeing all of your work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.